Tarek Adler's morning ritual never varied. Alarm at 5:30. Coffee brewed precisely to 195 degrees, 12 minutes of stretching. And a silent commute to Meridia Central Engineering, where he'd spent the last 9 years designing structures that defied gravity, but never his own expectations. At 34, his reputation for brilliant, innovative designs was matched only by his notorious inability to connect with others. His colleagues called him the machine behind his back, not that he cared. Today was Tuesday, which meant he would review the coastal bridge proposals. Have lunch alone at Harborview Caf, corner table, back to the wall, and spend the afternoon recalculating. Stress points for the new Performing Arts Center. Predictable, controllable. Exactly. As he preferred since the accident that took his parents and left him with nothing but scars and precision as a coping mechanism. The revision models need your sign-off, Tarek, his assistant said, sliding a tablet onto his immaculate desk. Tarek nodded without looking up, its fingers tracing the holographic rendering of steel and concrete floating above his workspace. Schedule's off, he muttered. Tell Verston I need another day. But the city council? Another day. His tone left no room for discussion. When the door closed, Tarek exhaled slowly, pinching the bridge of his nose. The headaches were getting worse, little earthquakes in his skull that medication couldn't touch. His doctor had recommended lifestyle changes, whatever that meant. Probably something involving people and conversation to things Tarek actively avoided. At precisely 12:30, he left for lunch, walking his usual route through Meridia's Old Town Square, where ancient copper domes contrasted with sleek modern towers, his towers. He'd designed 3 of the buildings that now defined the city's skyline, each one more innovative than the last. It should have felt like accomplishment. Instead, it felt hollow. The sudden downpour wasn't in the forecast. Tarek cursed under his breath as pedestrians scattered for shelter. He stood frozen, watching rain transform the square's mosaic tiles into a kaleidoscope of shimmering color. That's when he saw her. She stood perfectly still amid the chaos. Face tilted toward the sky, eyes closed as raindrops slid down her cheeks like tears. But she was smiling, a soft, rapturous expression, as if the rain was speaking secrets only she could hear. Her skin had an unusual undertone that Tarek couldn't quite place, almost iridescent in the strange stormlight. When she opened her eyes and looked directly at him, Tarek felt something he hadn't experienced in years: surprise. Her smile shifted, acknowledging him across the square. And suddenly the precise, measured world he'd constructed tilted on its axis. The rain seemed to slow, droplets suspended in air, and the background noise of the city faded to silence. For 11 perfectly counted seconds. There was nothing in Tarek's universe except her smile and the inexplicable feeling that he was being seen. Truly seen for the first time in years, the moment broke when someone bumped into him, jolting him back to reality. When he looked again, she was gone. Tarek stood motionless, scanning the crowd with uncharacteristic urgency. Logic told him to continue his routine lunch work, home butt for once. Logic failed him. He spent the afternoon distracted, sketching her smile instead of building supports, calculating the exact shade of her eyes rather than stress tolerances. The precise angle of her face in the rain haunted him, defying categorization in his ordered world. That night, for the first time in 9 years, Tarek deviated from his evening routine. Instead of reviewing blueprints until midnight, he walked to the Old Town Square and stood in the exact spot where he'd seen her, trying to understand what had happened. The rational part of his mind, the dominant part, insisted it was nothing. Perhaps low blood sugar or the beginning of a migraine. But as he turned to leave, something caught his small violet flower growing between the mosaic tiles where she had stood. A flower that hadn't been there this morning and couldn't possibly have grown in a day. Tariq knelt, touching its delicate petals with unsteady fingers. For the second time that day, his precisely ordered world trembled. 3 days passed, and Tarek's carefully constructed routine lay in ruins. He found himself returning to the square each evening, searching for the woman whose smile had somehow stopped time. The violet flower remained, impossibly vibrant despite the lack of soil or water, and he found himself guarding it from passers-by with an intensity that surprised him. "You're still watching it?" came a voice like wind through crystal. "I didn't expect that." Tarek turned to find her standing behind him, as if she'd materialized from the twilight itself. Up close, her features were even more striking, eyes with an unusual violet hue that matched the flower, dark hair that seemed to capture starlight in its depths, and skin with the faintest lavender undertone, as though she carried moonlight beneath her surface. "Who are you?" he managed, his normally analytical mind struggling to form coherent thoughts. "Naya," she replied, her smile returning, that same expression that had first shattered his perception. "And you're the man who can see me when others don't." "What does that mean?" "Everyone can see you," she laughed softly. "Look around, Tariq Adler." He did, and realized with a shock that while hundreds of people moved through the square, not a single person acknowledged Naya's presence. Some even walked around her with unconscious adjustments to their path, never making eye contact or showing awareness. "How do you know my name?" he asked, fighting the irrational urge to touch her to confirm she was real. "The same way I know you design buildings that reach for stars you've stopped believing in. The same way I know you count seconds and measure coffee because numbers don't leave like people do." She knelt beside the flower. "And I know this scares you more than anything has in 9 years." Tarek stepped back. "What are you?" "A traveler, you might say." Her fingers brushed the violet bloom, making it pulse with soft light. "From somewhere? Adjacent to your world?" For anyone else, such a claim would be immediate cause for concern. But Tarek had spent his career calculating the physics of impossible structures, making them possible through mathematics and sheer will. His mind immediately began constructing theoretical frameworks, parallel dimensions, quantum realities that could explain her presence. "You believe me?" she said, sounding surprised. "Most humans would be running by now." "I'm not most humans." "No," she agreed. "You're not. That's why I can appear to you." Over the next hour, as twilight deepened into night, Naya explained her nature in terms that challenged even Tarek's expansive understanding of physics. She came from a world that existed alongside Earth, in the same space but vibrating at a different frequency, a world called Lemuria that was slowly dying as its resonance with Earth weakened. "People sent travelers to find anchors," she explained. "Humans whose emotional frequency could help stabilize the connection between worlds." "And you think I'm one of these anchors?" Tarek asked skeptically. Naya's smile faltered. "No, you were supposed to be unreachable. Your emotional frequency is so controlled, so suppressed, that you should have been invisible to me." She looked at him with genuine confusion. "Yet when our eyes met, something happened that shouldn't be possible. You saw me, truly saw me," as they talked. Tarek noticed how her fingers traced patterns in the air when she spoke of complex concepts, how her head tilted slightly when considering his questions, how her presence seemed to make colors more vibrant around them. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, and for the first time in years. His analytical mind was fully engaged, not in numbers, but in understanding another person. "Will you help me understand your world?" she asked finally. "I need to learn why the connection is failing." The logical answer was no. His life had order, purpose, clarity. Getting involved with an apparent interdimensional traveler was the definition of chaos. Yet as he looked at her, this woman who seemed made of starlight and secret stark, found himself nodding. "Yes," he said, surprising himself. "I'll help you." Naya's smile returned, illuminating the night. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above his hand without touching. "Thank you," she whispered. "I think perhaps you were meant to see me after all." As they walked through the darkened city, Tarek realized with startling clarity that, for the first time since the accident, he wasn't counting seconds or measuring distances. For the first time in 9 years, he was simply present in the moment, and it terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. Over the next few weeks, Meridia transformed for Tarek. Streets he'd walked 1,000 times became new as he saw them through Naya's eyes. She marveled at things he'd long stopped noticing: the way sunlight filtered through leaves, the patterns of conversations in crowded cafes, the mathematical precision of a spider's web between railings. "Your world is so dense," she explained as they sat on his apartment balcony one evening. "So physical. So present. Lumeria is beautiful, but more like your concept of dreams, fluid, shifting, responsive to emotion rather than physical laws." Tarek had converted his living room into an impromptu research space, filling whiteboards with equations and theories about interdimensional physics based on Naya's descriptions. His work at the engineering firm had become secondary, much to the shock of his colleagues. "Show me again," he said, setting aside his tablet. Naya smiled and held out her palm. Concentrating, she created a small sphere of light that pulsed with violet energy. "This is what Lumeria feels like: pure vibrational energy given form through consciousness." When she took his hand and placed the light against his palm, Tarek gasped. It wasn't just light, it was emotion made tangible. A complex sensation of wonder, longing, and connection that brought unexpected tears to his eyes. "That's home," she whispered, watching his reaction. "That's what we're losing as the resonance falters." Their hands remained connected, her fingers intertwined with his. What had begun as an intellectual puzzle had become something far more complicated. Tarek found himself thinking about Naya during meetings, designing structures inspired by her descriptions of Lemurian architecture, waking from dreams where violet light and her smile merged into something that ached in his chest. One night as they walked along Meridia's waterfront, Naya stopped suddenly, her expression pained. "What's wrong?" Tarek asked, instantly alert. The resonance sits shifting again. She pressed her hand to her chest. "I can feel my connection weakening." Without thinking, Tarek pulled her into his arms, holding her steady as she trembled. "What happens if you lose the connection completely?" Her eyes met his, violet depths filled with both fear and resolution. "Then I fade from this world and return to Lumera, probably forever." The thought of her disappearing sent a spike of panic through him that was entirely new and overwhelming. In that moment, with the city lights reflecting on the harbor waters and Naya's face tilted up toward his, Tarek finally recognized the emotion he'd been avoiding naming. "I don't want you to go," he said simply, his voice rough. Her hand rose to touch his face, tracing the scar that ran along his jawline from the accident. "I don't want to go either," she whispered. "Not anymore." When their lips met, the world around them seemed to shimmer, reality thinning as their connection strengthened. Tarek felt as though he was simultaneously falling and finding solid ground for the first time. Naya's kiss tasted of stardust and possibility, her body warm and real against his despite her otherworldly origins. Later that night, in the soft darkness of his apartment, their connection deepened. Tarek traced constellations across the subtle lavender undertones of her skin, memorizing every curve and plane with an engineer's precision and a lover's wonder. Naya moved with an ethereal grace that reminded him of her otherness, yet responded to his touch with such human passion that the boundaries between their worlds seemed meaningless. "I can feel you," she whispered against his shoulder, her body entwined with his. "Not just physically, I can feel your frequency aligning with mine." In the quiet hours before dawn, as Naya slept beside him, Tarek realized that his carefully constructed walls had completely fallen. The man who had spent 9 years avoiding connection now found himself bound to someone from another dimension. And the irony wasn't lost on him. Yet as he watched the soft rise and fall of her breathing, he understood that his life of precise measurement and careful control had been a different kind of illusion, one far less beautiful than the reality he now faced. What he didn't yet understand was that their growing connection was causing ripples. Across both their worlds, ripples that would soon become waves capable of either saving or destroying everything they had found. Together, Tara woke to the sound of breaking glass. Across his bedroom, the mirror had shattered without apparent cause, fragments suspended in mid-air for an impossible moment before falling to the floor. Beside him, Naya sat upright, her eyes wide and glowing with violet light. "It's happening," she whispered, voice layered with harmonics that made the remaining glass in the room vibrate. The boundaries are thinning too quickly. Over the past month, their relationship had deepened beyond anything Tarek had thought possible. Each touch, each shared moment seemed to strengthen whatever connection had formed between them that first day in the rain. But with that connection came increasingly strange phenomena, objects moving without being touched. Moments where gravity seemed to shift, and now this.
Mommy.
"What's happening?" Tarek said. Taking her trembling hands in his, Naya's gaze seemed focused on something far beyond the walls of his apartment. "The Council of Luminaries, they've detected our bond. They're trying to use it to force the resonance between worlds. Isn't that what you wanted? To save your world?" She turned to him, fear evident in her expression. "Not like this. They're attempting to merge the frequencies too rapidly. It could tear both worlds apart." Later that morning, as they walked through Meridia, the evidence of destabilization was becoming visible to others as well. Patches of air shimmered like heat mirages despite the cool autumn temperature. Pedestrians stopped to stare at momentary glimpses of impossible architecture that appeared and vanished within seconds, spires of crystalline material and flowing structures that defied Earth's physics. They're glimpses of Lumeria, Naya explained quietly. The worlds are bleeding into each other. At the engineering firm, Tarek's colleagues had gathered around windows to watch the strange atmospheric phenomena. He ignored their questions, focusing instead on adapting the models he'd been developing based on Naya's explanations. If the Council was using their connection to force the worlds into alignment, perhaps they could find a way to stabilize that process. "Adler, what are you working on?" his director demanded, peering at the complex equations filling his screens. "This isn't the Arts Center design. It's more important," Tarek replied without looking up. "I need the quantum modeling software from R&D. For what purpose?" "To save two worlds," he answered honestly. Knowing how it sounded, that evening Naya revealed the full truth as they stood in the city square where they had first met. The violet flower had multiplied, now forming a perfect circle that glowed with internal light. "I wasn't sent to find an anchor," she admitted, voice breaking. "I was sent to find a catalyst, someone whose emotional frequency could be manipulated to force the resonance." The Council knew a traumatized human with suppressed emotions who suddenly opened up would create a quantum instability they could exploit. She met his eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. "They chose you because of your isolation, your pain. I was supposed to make you feel again just enough to use you." The betrayal should have devastated him, should have confirmed his lifelong belief that connection only led to pain. Instead, Tarek found himself reaching for her. "But that's not what happened," he said softly. "No," she whispered. "I fell in love with you. I chose you over my world, over my mission, and now both our worlds are in danger because of it." As night fell, the sky above Meridia fractured with aurora-like lights that pulsed in patterns too regular to be natural. Across the city, people gathered in streets and on rooftops to watch the display, unaware of the danger it represented. News outlets reported similar phenomena worldwide. In Tarek's apartment, now transformed into a makeshift lab, they worked frantically to develop a stabilization model. His engineering mind, which had once designed buildings to withstand physical forces, now calculated how to balance the forces between dimensions. "If we can create a controlled resonance point," he explained, fingers flying over keyboards, "we might be able to establish a stable connection without full merger." Naya nodded, her form occasionally flickering as the boundaries between worlds weakened further, a bridge instead of a collision. Their eyes met across the room, both understanding what remained unspoken. Creating such a bridge would require an anchor point, a physical location where someone straddled both realities permanently. One of them would need to become that anchor, neither fully in one world nor the other, forever caught between as dawn approached. Naya's body became increasingly translucent, the effort of remaining in Earth's dimension draining her strength. Tarek worked with desperate intensity, refusing to acknowledge what they both knew: time was running out, and they would soon face an impossible choice. The morning sky above Meridia had turned a deep violet, swirling with patterns that scientists worldwide were struggling to explain. In some areas of the city, gravity fluctuated unpredictably. and there were reports of people witnessing landscapes from another world superimposed over there, on crystalline structures and flowing architecture that existed for moments before vanishing. Authorities had begun evacuations of the downtown area, but Tarek and Naya moved against the tide of fleeing citizens, making their way to the old town square where everything had begun. The circle of violet flowers had expanded dramatically, now covering most of the square and pulsing with light that synced to the patterns in the sky. "This is the thinnest point between worlds," Naya explained, her voice echoing strangely as her form shifted between solid and translucent. "The resonance is strongest here." Tarek carried a device he had built throughout the night, a modified quantum field generator that, in theory, could stabilize the connection between dimensions if properly calibrated. Its design incorporated principles from both his structural engineering background and what he had learned about Lumerian energy patterns from Naya. "Once activated, how long do we have to make the choice?" he asked, setting up the device in the center of the flower circle. Naya's expression was solemn. "Moments. The bridge must be anchored immediately, or both worlds will continue to destabilize." Around them, reality itself seemed to be coming apart. Buildings flickered between their solid earth forms and ghostly Lumerian counterparts. The ground beneath their feet occasionally turned transparent, revealing glimpses of a crystalline landscape far below. The few remaining bystanders stood frozen in awe and terror as the impossible unfolded before them. As Tariq made the final adjustments to the device, Naya placed her hands on his shoulders. "It should be me," she said quietly. "I belong to Lumeria. I should be the anchor." He looked up at her, memorizing every detail of her face. "You know it won't work. The Council tried to use me as a catalyst because of my specific frequency. It has to be me. You'd be trapped between worlds forever," she protested, tears forming in her violet eyes. "Neither fully here nor there, never completely with me or your own kind." Tarek smiled with unexpected peace. "Before I met you, I was already trapped between worlds, living but not alive, present but not connected." He stood, taking her face gently between his hands. "You showed me how to feel again. This isn't a sacrifice, it's a choice." The sky above them tore open, revealing glimpses of a violet sky filled with impossible structures. The Council of Luminaries had forced the final phase of merger. "We're out of time," Naya whispered. Tarek activated the device, which emitted a pulsing tone that resonated with the flowers around them. The ground beneath their feet stabilized, no longer flickering between worlds. "I need you to go back," he told her firmly. "Return to Lumeria and guide their energy toward this point. I'll remain here and create the anchor from Earth's side." Her hands clutched his desperately. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," he said gently. "But this isn't goodbye. Once the bridge is established, you can cross between worlds. We'll still have moments together, just not in the way we imagined." Their final kiss was filled with both heartbreak and hope, the taste of salt from their tears mingling as reality shifted around them. When they parted, Naya stepped back into the center of the flower circle, her body beginning to phase more completely into her native form, more light than substance, colors shifting beyond the human spectrum. "I love you," she said, her voice already sounding distant. "In this world, in any other." "And I love you," Tarek replied, activating the final sequence on the device. "Now go save both our worlds." Naya's form dissolved into pure violet energy that streamed upward, toward the tear in the sky. Tarek stepped into the precise center of the circle and opened himself completely to the connection they had formed. He felt his consciousness expand beyond his body, stretching between dimensions as the device channeled his unique frequency. Pain unlike anything he had ever experienced tore through him as his very atoms were pulled between realities. But he maintained focus, visualizing the bridge he had designed, not of concrete and steel, but of energy and consciousness. He could sense Naya on the other side, directing the energies of Lumeria toward his position, creating the other half of the connection. When the resonance finally stabilized, the violet sky above Meridia gradually returned to blue, though with subtle patterns that hadn't existed before. The flowers in the square remained, now a permanent feature that city officials would later declare a protected phenomenon. Gravity and physical laws reasserted themselves. though scientists would spend years studying the residual effects of what many called the convergence. Tarek Adler disappeared that day, at least in any conventional sense. Those who visited the square in the quiet hours of twilight sometimes reported seeing a man made partly of light, his form more suggestion than substance, moving among the violet flowers. Engineers at Meridia Central claimed his influence could still be felt in the structures he had designed, which now seemed to occasionally catch the light in ways that defied explanation, and sometimes in the space between day and night. When the boundaries between worlds naturally thinned, visitors to the square might glimpse a woman with violet eyes, meeting a man composed partly of light, their hands almost but never quite touching across dimensions, their smiles containing both joy and sorrow as they shared those brief moments together. In Tarek's abandoned apartment, authorities found walls covered with equations and a journal, whose final entry read, "One smile changed everything in an instant. Now that change will bridge to worlds forever." Some would call it sacrifice. I call it finding my purpose. For the first time, I am exactly where I belong, between worlds, between moments, between breaths, and somehow completely alive. The story of the architect who saved two worlds became legend in Meridia. Children scattered violet flower petals in the old town square, and lovers met there to whisper promises of devotion that would transcend any boundary. Engineers studied Tarek's final designs, marveling at the revolutionary concepts that seemed to defy conventional physics. And in quiet moments, when the stars aligned just so, Naya would cross the bridge between worlds. Her violet light merging with Tarek's transformed existence in a dance of energy that reminded both Earth and Lemuria that love, in its purest form, could indeed change everything in an instant, even the very fabric of reality itself.